Welcome to the Expansive CEO podcast. I'm your host, Hannah Chapman, founder of Expansive CEO and X Squared Wealth Planning. Buckle in as we explore how to create true prosperity and build a business and a life that expands beyond yourself and makes a dent in the universe. Welcome, everyone, to this episode of the Expansive CEO podcast. I am your host, Hannah Chapman, and today I am with Diane Armitage, who has been in the self-development space for a long time and worked with some really influential figures that she's going to talk about in a minute. But today, when we're talking, this is the end of 2024 here, where we're recording this conversation. Right now, she mentors as a master teacher at a global level. She works with people all over the world, teaching entrepreneurs and wannabe entrepreneurs and business leaders how to reconnect with the power and genius they already have locked within them to really create their lives and their businesses on their own terms. And again, a lot of this is rooted in a really deep tradition with really fabulous mentors. So Diane, I would love for you to first thank you for being here.
My pleasure.
And then I would love for you to introduce yourself even further. Tell us more of the story of how you got to where you are, and why you do what you do today.
Well, thank you. It's such a pleasure being on this. I just love it. So 30 years ago, I was a brand new entrepreneur who had no idea what I was doing. I had left the big corporate world and the corporate climbing ladder to be a freelance writing person. And by serendipity and plan and purpose, one of my very first clients, actually my second client on my first day of business, was Bob Proctor. And he is a fairly well-known success guru, known all over the world. He was in the movie The Secret. And he and I became writing partners. And for 27 years, we wrote everything together. And so we were doing all of his curriculum, and I was writing all of his audio scripts and his video scripts and, big events that we were doing, and then all of the marketing attached to it. And of course, as we worked together pretty much daily for 27 years, I was like the little Padawan, to the Jedi Master. I was the apprentice. And it was really amazing that he kind of took me under his wing. And what happened in my own life was so dramatic and such a quantum leap forward. And so as I started as a freelance writer, within a year, I had a marketing agency, a global marketing agency. And it grew very quickly. And many doors started opening, and I began working with other big personal development, Les Brown, Jack Canfield, Mark Victor Hansen, and then also working with big corporations, Keller Williams International, Remix International, REI.com, Patagonia.com. And the company grew very, very large. It was really amazing. And I really worked with these people to come up with very strategic and creative, innovative solutions. That had a lot to do with also being able to mentor with Jay Abraham, who I consider the biggest marketing genius on the planet. And he and I worked in a mentorship relationship for 3 years early in my career. So I was blessed to have these two giant global mentors to learn from. It was amazing. And about 4 years ago, Bob said, Diane, it's time for you to come out from behind the curtain and start teaching your own curriculum and start doing your own mentoring, around the world. And initially I was like, I don't know, I kind of like being back here behind the curtain. And he was like, no. And so that's what I started doing. And it's just been really wonderful and amazing. It's just amazing people that I get to meet and work with, and the organizations that I work with, and just really seeing them step into their own empowerment. It's just incredible. And what can be done in a business when people do that for themselves.
Mm-hmm. Yes, especially when it comes from leadership, when it comes from the top down. So working with, entrepreneurs, with CEOs, with people in these leadership positions, I truly believe in my heart that we really need to help leaders shift, help leaders see themselves
Hmm.
more clearly, more deeply, be more in tune, more aligned with their vision, with their own inner strength and inner power. And that's what allows them to see the strength, power, uniqueness of the people that work with them
Exactly.
as well. So it really does. That's one place where things like the culture of a firm, of a business, of any collective really does flow from the top down in that sense. And so
Absolutely.
yeah, I would love to hear hear you share more about the framework that you created that you've called the Tower of Power. You told me about this in our first conversation, and um, it's like intuitive almost when
Mm.
you like describe it, you're like, oh yeah, that totally makes sense. But they're like the nuance of each step and how, how it flows, where it can get stuck, all of that is, I think, where especially that mentorship really comes in. So tell us more about that.
Oh, right. It kind of landed on me about a year ago, the idea of it. I call it your built-in tower of power. And what it really is we have these six mental factors, and we've always had these six mental factors, and they are the discerning factors between we as thinking humans versus any other creature on the planet, any other thing on the planet, panda bears, protein bars, whatever, right? So we have these abilities, and Bob used to talk about them all the time, but he would just kind of list them off in a litany. And he would say, we've got reason and will and perception and memory and imagination and intuition. And then he would kind of move on and he would say, these are the skills that you really want to really hone, and because you've been given the gift to hone these and really work from them. Well, it occurred to me that there's a hierarchy there in that built-in tower of power of those mental factors. And I consider actually two of them energetic or spiritual factors, and then the other four fall beneath. And as you work the hierarchy and understand how the hierarchy works, you begin to understand why really great ideas move into reality quickly and why really great ideas never get off the ground. And so when you begin to understand how it works, you can begin to say, okay, wait a minute. I'm not moving down the tower of power correctly. I'm jumping all the way down here where the idea is going to get squashed like a Zamboni. So when a lot of people are like, oh, well, this is kind of woo woo. It's not woo woo. This is actually your mental factors that you're working with. And anytime that you move them into a business setting, anytime that you move them into any factor of your life and work from the tower of power down instead of building the tower up, that is when real change begins to happen, lasting change and quantum change. It's
Mm.
astounding to see.
Yeah, it's reminding me of just a brief interaction I had with my younger brother. I don't know, a few years ago. It was interesting. Um, Something about what was I telling him? It was something around, like that we can we create our own reality, like
Mm-hmm.
what you think becomes what you believe and goes out into the world and becomes what's real.
Mm-hmm.
He was like, I don't know about that. And I was like, I told him everything that's ever been created by humans was first a thought.
Indeed.
And he was
And
like, oh, wait a second. Yeah, yeah, you're right. It's like,
well,
I
and
know.
and and what most people don't understand is that we are energetic beings. We are all energy. I mean, we're just vibrating at a high level of vibration, everything about us. And we're always interacting with an energetic universe out here. We're always interjecting and always interacting and always causing. We are catalysts in this energetic universe. And so a thought is actually energy. It's just a speck of energy. And when you move that energy, you have the ability to choose how you wish to move that energy, how you wish to expand upon it or not expand upon it. And this actually comes into play even when you look at when people get really wadded up on two different sides of an issue. Like, for instance, we just had the US elections. People got really wadded up on either side, right? And when you're moving into that wadded up space, then you're sending an energetic vibration out that creates the larger vibration because the energy becomes a thought, the thought becomes a word, the word becomes an action, the action becomes a result. That's the way energy works. And so when you understand that and you say, okay, well, I get it when people are really wadded up on the other side of a thing. Well, look at how you're growing your business. Look at the big ideas that are being presented to you. What's the first thing you do? Well, you think, well, that probably can't work. Well, that's going to cost too much money. We don't have partners for that. We don't know how to find partners for that. We've never done this before. That's kind of out of our bailiwick. I don't know how we could sell that to anybody. It's too expensive to develop. So we come up with all these reasons and we just squash the idea. That energy just gets squashed.
Mm,
But it takes an energetic thought to stop it. And an energetic thought can also move it and propel it forward.
mm,
So when I talk about the intuition is at the top of the tower. This is where you're grabbing an idea out of the ether. This is where you're plucking ideas. And your intuition is, when you're in line with your intuition, you really begin to see all of the opportunity, all of the untapped assets, all of the potential that lies in your world, all of the change that you want for yourself, what you deserve for yourself. You begin to have these thoughts. You're plucking this idea out of the ether. Now, we can move it down to the reasoning mind, which is at the bottom of the tower of power. And the reasoning mind will be like, nope, nope, your mother's not going to approve. Your spouse isn't going to approve. It's going to be right. You're going to have to work too hard. You're going to be broke. You're going to lose your house. I mean, it comes up with all these ideas where instead, if we move from intuition into our imagination, our creative element, then we begin to expand on the idea. Our imagination is always going to expand on an idea, whether it's negative or positive. We can stand at the edge of a building and look down and fear falling, and we're nowhere close to falling. We create that vertigo in our imagination. So our imagination can run like a crazy horse on a plane and really take us in a negative direction, or we can nurture that thought and make it a positive imaginative idea and start really building on what that result would look like in our world, in the ripples that we create in the world, how we interact with the world, how we change the world. And then with that imagination, then we begin to form the thought in a larger energetic cloud, so to speak. And then we begin to work it down the tower of power to where it is a reasonable idea. It is something that can be instilled and installed. Does
mm.
that make sense?
Yes, absolutely. So I would love for you to um like take an example down
Mm.
through. Because there's so many things that are like coming up. I also have a dear friend who um had shared an anecdote similar to what you're saying, where um she and her spouse would have ideas. Maybe she has an idea and it's not really formed yet. It's just a little bit of an idea, a little bit of an excitement, and share it with her spouse. And he would say, "Oh, no, that's not going to work." Exactly what you're saying. No, this is why.
Mm-hmm.
Too expensive. We don't have enough time. That doesn't make sense. And she would say, "Hey, you're squashing my embers."
I love that.
Right? He's got these little sparks of an idea, and he's just putting them out immediately.
Yeah,
Like there's just a little, it's just a little ember, and you're
right.
you're snuffing them out.
Instead of fanning it into a flame.
Exactly. So with that, like that was like this similar the idea of like, okay, how do we protect our little embers so
Mm-hmm.
that they can grow? So you said first intuition, right? Like that first inspiration, then imagination,
Right.
let's fan the flame of that ember, let it give it a little oxygen,
Mm-hmm.
right? Let it grow. What comes next?
Well, the next is the will. So the will is what I call the fulcrum point of the entire tower. So the way it works is intuition, imagination, will, perception, memory, reasoning mind. And the reasoning mind is made up of two pieces, the conscious mind and the subconscious mind. And they are the machine that puts all of your reality into play, those two elements. But when you're talking about, let me give you a funny example. Let me think of something like something that I would do with Bob, because I would always be like, I want this, but I can't have that. I want this, but I can't do that. And he'd be like, okay, let's work through this. So let me give you an example of me deciding that I wanted to move to Laguna Beach. I came here. I was on New Year's Eve, 94 into 95. I stayed at this beautiful resort, the Surf and Sand Resort. I was right on the water. I fell in love with Laguna Beach. The next morning, I wrote my journal that I wanted to live here. And then I put the journal away and did it over here, right? Because this is what we do. We have this imaginative, great idea. And, oh my goodness, it would be so much fun. And then we're like, oh, the reasoning mind is like, well, you can't afford it. How are you going to get the money to pay for being in an expensive town like that? How are you going to work? I mean, it's not really close to anything that you could commute to, blah, 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 blah. Right. And so, it's like, well, why don't you wait until as soon as then you can do this? Well, 5 years later, I still hadn't done anything. And so I was in Carlsbad, which was about 45 minutes down the road. I had been pulled in for a really gigantic website redo contract. And they had asked me to do a 3-year stint with them. And we got everything fixed in like 8 months. And so I was like, yay, okay, I could go back to my entrepreneurial world and I can do more work with Bob. I mean, I never stopped working with Bob, but now I could really fling the doors back open and really make it happen. And so I was calling him from the car on the way home from the office after I turned in all my stuff. And I was like, yes, I'm free. And he said, well, do you want to move back to Denver? And I said, no, I'm not ready to move back to Denver. And he said, well, where do you want to live? And I said, anywhere in the world. And he said, anywhere in the world. And I said, Laguna Beach, but it's so expensive, right? Because this is what your reasoning mind does. Your subconscious mind is so in control of everything you've got going on in your world. You are rutted in a way of thinking. You are coloring within the lines. You are never going to be allowed to plant a seed outside that row because your subconscious mind is like, whoa, wait a minute. That would put you at risk. That doesn't even feel safe to me. That sounds like kind of a crazy idea. We're not crazy. We're not risky people, right? So I was like, oh, it's so expensive. Well, then I got this long silence from Bob, and I thought, oh, good, it's going to come. It's good. He's good. And he's like, are you in your car right now, right? And I said, yes. And he said, how far are you from Laguna? I said, oh, it's like 45 minutes up the road. It's way up there. And he says, I want you to drive up there right now. And I said, now? And he was like, well, you don't have a job. He got all the time in the world. And so he said, I want you to drive up to Laguna Beach. I want you to take out a mailbox and start forwarding your mail. You're going to figure out how to move to Laguna. So now this is the will stepping into play and saying, okay, I've got this imaginative idea. I've decided that I'm going to drive to beautiful Laguna Beach. Notice he didn't say do it online. He said drive to Laguna Beach. Why? Because as soon as I drive in, I'm in the environment that I wish to live in. I'm already seeing myself in that space. So then the will comes into play, and I actually drove and took out the mailbox. So you actually have to take an action in the will part. You've got to take an action, even if it's the smallest action to take. Now, this was kind of a crazy action, start forwarding my mail. And I thought, well, it takes 6 weeks for the post office to get away from forwarding. It could be months before, my mail starts forwarding there. I got plenty of time to figure this out, maybe. But I still took the action. That's the important part. So I called Bob afterwards and I said, okay, I did it. And he said, what are you going to do next? And I was like, what do you mean? What am I going to do next? He's like, well, what are you going to do next? He said, I think you need to go get boxes and packing material and start packing your stuff tonight. And he said, and don't start with the stuff that doesn't matter. I want you to pack up your office and your bathroom tonight. And then tomorrow you pack up your kitchen. And I was like, wow, okay. Because that doesn't say, well, maybe I'll be moving. That says I'm moving. And I'm moving quickly because all of this stuff is packed. Mm-hmm. So this was another thing of the will, right? Now, as you're working with the will, you're still engaging with the imagination because you have to continue to build the idea in your mind of being there. You have to start looking for places. You have to start feeling yourself in the place. You have to start exploring different parts of the town to decide where you want to live. This was all stuff that I started to do. Now, I hadn't really put the word out to anybody. Nobody. I didn't want to put the word out to anybody. I mean, my goodness, my reasoning mind is like, you're still not going to make it happen. And so 10 days later, out of nowhere, well, it wasn't even 10 days later. It was probably 5 or 6 days later, out of nowhere, no connection to me whatsoever. An email popped into my box. Somebody in Laguna Beach had finished redoing a house. They'd had it on the market briefly. They were taking it off for the winter. They were going to rent it for 6 months. This person had no connection to me whatsoever. And in 10 days, I was living in Laguna Beach. So now when you work from your will, the next step down is your perception. And your perception is so important here because it can skew your memories of your successes and your failures. Mm-hmm. And when you come up from the reasoning mind is really good about messing with the memories that you have of all of your failures. And then your perception gets involved and makes it even bigger. And when you're working down from the will and you're already taking action, you're reminding yourself of all the other wins you've already had, of all the other successes you've created in your world, of all the other things that you've done to get your business up and rolling, and the successes that you've had in your business since you've been doing this. And this crazy idea that you actually implemented, and it seemed a little hard and it seemed a little crazy, but it worked. And so your perception and your memory are getting involved on the upscale side as you move down the tower of power. And then when you come to your reasoning mind, where your conscious mind is sitting there thinking, taking in ideas, and deciding if those ideas are beliefs, you've already done so much work down the tower of power that the reasoning mind just says, okay, this is actually a really good idea. This is something that I believe is a belief for me, for us, for you. And then it moves it into the subconscious mind. The subconscious mind can't accept, it can only accept, it can't reject. And subconscious mind is responsible for creating the result. So that idea, very odd idea that kind of came up in my mind, but you can see how you start with the intuitive idea, you move into the imagination, you act with the will, and then you firm up the idea. You continue to build out the idea as you move through your perception and your memory of all the successes you've created, all the empowerment that you already have in your world. And then you move it into the conscious mind, which feeds it without any flaw into the subconscious mind. And then the results begin to appear.
Mm.
Does
Mm.
that make sense?
Yes. Yeah. And what it's reminding me of, and the different things that are like coming up as you're describing that, is the process, when you skip from I would say the imagination piece, even
Mm-hmm.
from the intuition down to the reasoning mind, but even if it's from the imagination down to the reasoning mind, um, mm, that is really where we can get stuck,
Mm-hmm.
analysis paralysis being one. Even if it's not necessarily negative, right? It's just the like, I'm
Mm-hmm.
stuck. I don't
Mm-hmm.
know what to do next. And a lot of times that the what you're describing as will sounds to me like take an action,
Mm-hmm.
do something that gets you out of the stuck.
Mm-hmm.
Because when you leave it at the two, just the intuition and imagination, if you don't take some sort of action, yeah, like you're saying, that then it gets filtered down to the reasoning mind and it just blah goes away.
Right, exactly.
But it
Yeah,
needs,
so I
needs a
often
little bit.
say, a lot of times you set a goal for yourself and you're going to steam out of the harbor and you're going to go for that new port across the ocean, right? And you've got this new goal and it's so beautiful and it's so beautiful. And you can get so busy getting ready to get ready to get ready to get ready that you just paddle around in the harbor. You're not going anywhere. Or you don't even untie yourself from the dock to start heading out of the harbor toward the goal. And so
Mhm.
this is why it's so important to take any action that you can think of. And in most cases in the world, somebody else has done something similar to what you've done, and they have a step that you can follow,
Mhm.
even if you don't think you know. So it is so important to take the action, because when you take the action, you're telling universe and all of the planetary laws that govern the universe that you, this energetic being, are moving in a catalytic formation, a form, a movement. You're moving as a catalyst with this energetic idea, and the universe makes room for that energetic idea. And of course, the other law of energy is that anything that energy flows to, energy expands upon. And so it is kind of a statement. It's a statement to yourself, but it's a statement as an energetic being and an energetic catalyst in this energetic world. You are moving something into form and you're acting with precision. Even if you don't know exactly what that precision is, you're still taking the action.
Right. And that what's coming to mind again is thinking about, I talk a lot about human design and, who you're designed to be, how you're designed to take action and make decisions, all of these different pizzas. And I can think of many people and different profiles even that tend to get stuck in the I have to know more before
Mm,
I can take an action. Well, I have to learn more. I have to figure it out better. It has to have more of a plan before I take an action.
mhm,
And that can be especially for people who have, for example, like a 1-3 profile. That one line wants to know everything first
mhm,
before it moves. The 3 line, on the other hand, wants to try things. It's here to experiment. It's here to throw spaghetti at the wall and see what works. The
mhm,
1 line, though, if you're stuck in that one space, doesn't want to take any action at all. It just wants to learn more. That's a great idea. Let's learn everything about it. Let's go get a
mhm,
PhD.
mhm,
No, no, no,
mhm,
no. That's not what we have to do. That's not what's one thing you can try. What's one thing, and that's one of the ways that I kind of describe that too in the human design world. Hey, your 3 line is going to help your 1 line. Your 3 line of let's take an
mhm,
action, let's try something is going to give the 1 line more data
mhm.
so that
Well,
you
and
actually get like you're saying, oh, now we have something um to think about, right?
mm,
We took an action and now we have some data to like keep moving from.
exactly. And I love how you explain that because for me, coming from my world of science of mind, and I love the human design. After I listened to you, I actually did the whole thing myself. Coming from science of mind, that one line is that paradigm. It's the embedded paradigm in the reasoning mind that says, oh, no, no, got to keep, oh, no. And most of the time, the paradigms that we have in our minds aren't even our own. We didn't even put them there. They were planted there by coaches, parents, grandparents, teachers, you know, you know,
Society.
society, exactly what we see on the television, what we hear in the news, all of that. And when we're babies, we are not even able to consciously make a decision if it's true or false. And it just falls right into the subconscious mind. And thus it begins to create the same results of the people and the community around you, the family around you, right? So it's that paradigm thing. Now, the 3 to me is your intuitive mind, it's your inner spirit. It's that thing that you landed on the planet with, that you've got this passion, you have this purpose, you have this skill, talent, and ability that nobody else on the planet has. And that skill, talent, ability, that intuitive sense of you is always going to be nudging you, always going to be nudging for expansion and expression. And that's where you get that conflict between what you call the 1 and the 3.
Hmm. Yes, absolutely. And the where, how do I want to say that? Where manifestation actually happens, where you create something in the world, is where you allow both of those to work together
Mm-hmm.
in the way that
Mm-hmm.
they're meant to, right? That personality side of the 1 line is really important. It has such a beautiful purpose, and we have to, we have to work with all of our energy, the whole package,
Mm-hmm.
to get to, what do I want to say? Like be aligned with who we are fully as a full
Correct.
as a full being, not just that logical personality side.
Mm-hmm.
Um, Not everyone is logical on the personality side, but that's again, the more like this is my who I am. I'm aware of, this is who I think I am, rather. Um, Kind of goes, follows with the reasoning mind. Does it make sense?
Mm-hmm.
Can I filter
Exactly.
that through past experience to see if it worked before, right? Rather than, look at, hey, what are the possibilities here?
Mm-hmm.
What have you done that's similar that gives you any sort of sense that, hey, this could work because that worked before?
Right. I mean, so many times when I'm working with clients and they're stuck at that terror barrier moment, which could be months, it could be years, a terror barrier years, right? They're stuck at that space and they've forgotten how powerful they are and all the things that they've accomplished, everything that they've done and succeeded at in their lives. And every single time it required the imagination, thinking it was possible, and taking an action step to make it possible. And so when you begin to remind yourself of all of these successes, it doesn't matter what it is anymore, really. It can be, having children, raising children, learning how to cook. I mean, all kinds of things. These are things that you never knew before, but you follow the same process. I remember one of the very last big lessons Bob taught me when I was saying something about, oh yeah, I got this going on, I got that going, I got that, but I don't have the man. I don't have the man. For some reason, I'm really stuck on the man. And he was driving his little Mercedes in Toronto, and he started yelling at me, not paying attention to the road. And he was like, "It's all the same. It is all the same. It is all the same." Whatever you think is a small thing, whatever you think is that thing that you accomplished when you were 15, getting your driver's license, whatever you think that was, whatever you're looking at now, same process. Same process. And it's true. And so when we look at everything that we've accomplished, everything that we've created, now it's time to say, okay, this is what I did to make that happen. I took a step. I thought that it could be a possibility. I took the fantasy and made it a theory. I thought, well, if I actually did this, if I did that, I could actually, well, we could at least take a step and try, you know?
Yes, exactly, exactly. And then coming down, putting it, what was the next one? Perception.
Mm-hmm.
Um, that part reminded me of um from Dan Sullivan
Mm-hmm.
and Dr. Ben Hardy wrote the book, The Gap and the Gain for him with Dan
Mm-hmm.
Sullivan based on all of, his work with Strategic Coach. That really reminded me of that concept of being in the gain rather than in the gap, right?
Absolutely.
If you are perceiving that you're still far away from the goal,
Mm-hmm.
then there's a certain amount of hopelessness
Mm-hmm.
that can creep in, or resignation, or just never, I'm just never going to get there. um and entrepreneurs do this a lot to themselves
Mm-hmm.
all the time. That's why they wrote a book about it, right? But I can I can absolutely see how the framework that you're creating like helps establish being in the gain rather than focusing on the gap. Because yes, the gap exists. It's not saying that you're already at, the thing where that you want to create. We're not saying that, that hasn't happened in the 3D world in your experience just yet. So the gap exists. But if you think it's just the gap and you forget that, oh, you've come all the way, you've made this much progress, you've come miles and miles already, and the gap is actually just, maybe 5% of the
Mm-hmm.
journey. You've already
Mm-hmm.
come 95% of the way. What does that feel like? That feels so much different, right?
Right. Mm-hmm.
It's like here's the marathon you're about to run. You're at the beginning of 26 miles. Yeah, that feels like a lot, it can. But when you're at mile 25 and now like everyone is there's like a huge crowd and people are cheering, suddenly that last mile doesn't feel nearly as daunting. You're like, "Oh,
Right.
I already went 25. I can do this last one. This is going
Yeah.
to be easy." And that's what that really brings to mind.
I like that a lot. It reminds me of an Ernest Holmes passage that I absolutely love. I've pretty much memorized it. It's in his book, This Thing Called You. And he talks about the fact that you're here in this life here and you're looking at what you want over there. And you're like, wow, that is a long ways away, man. It is a long ways away. And you feel like, okay, in order to get over there, I'm going to have to like swim across these giant oceans and climb these mighty mountains and, work my way through the forests of trees to get there. And he said, what you really need to remember is that the distance between here and there is simply a thing of thought. It's simply a thing of thought. And the sooner you begin to bring there into here, which is that imaginative element, as soon as you begin to act as if it's already in play, understanding that as soon as you put the energetic thought out, it is already in play. It is already in the creative process. It is already happening. You're the only one who's going to stop it from happening. So as soon as you begin to move that with your thought into acting as if it's already done and taking actions every day as if you're already in that space, it comes together like this.
Mm. Yes, yes. And we see the gap just right,
Yes,
just getting smaller and smaller as we
right,
continue to make and take those actions that are
right.
now.
It's expectation and assumption. It
Hmm.
is expectation and assumption that this is already done.
Hmm.
I'm just I'm just moving that already done concept into reality.
Mm. The other piece that again, so we're back, we're all the way down, right, to
Mhm.
reasoning mind,
Memory and reasoning mind. Yeah.
memory and reasoning mind. Um, the piece that is kind of falling into place there is that once we get to the reasoning mind, or the thing again that's like similar when I talk about human design, is that the mind is not a decision maker for almost anybody. There, like 99.9% of the population, the mind is not your decision maker. It's either your sacral authority or your emotional authority or your splenic authority or your ego authority. It's a lower chakra. It's a
Mhm.
lower space in your body where your decision making really lies. But once we have that, once we are deconditioned and once we understand, how to follow our actual authority really well, then the mind comes in as the thing that can really help with the details, help with the nuance, help with the execution.
Hmm.
So our mind is so beautiful, so powerful, so important. It's just not the thing. We don't put the cart before the horse,
Hmm.
right? It's the horse, I guess, and and our decision making is the cart, right? So we want or the it's the cart and our decision making is the horse, rather, right? That's driving, and but our mind is important, it's impactful. We don't want to ignore it, but it's not the thing that starts the whole process. It's not the thing that um drives the decision making. It's the
Hmm.
thing that comes in afterwards and helps us make sense of it, make good connections with the
Right.
details of everything around it.
Right. Interesting. Yeah. Yeah, that's interesting because when I come from my science of mind background, that to me is explaining the subconscious mind versus the conscious mind. Because the
Mm,
subconscious mind is the thing that denies that that says no, that doesn't work. This is all we do. This is all we do. This is, this is. Now, when the subconscious mind is in charge of the paradigm, and you're seeing the results in your life, you're seeing the results in your life, you're seeing the results in your life, you look at the results of your life, you feed that thought of the results back into your conscious mind. And if they're bad results, your conscious mind is going to continue to think, okay, I'm stuck in this position. I'm never going to be able to improve my position. I'm always never going to be able to make money. I'm never going to be able to save money. I'm never going to be able to build out a business the way, la, 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 la. It moves into the subconscious mind. Subconscious mind continues to create the same result moves into the thinking mind. The thinking mind is like, okay, well, that's, clearly look at all my results. I'm not getting anywhere. I'm not getting anywhere. I'm not getting anywhere. So it's kind of interesting. I like how you put it. I like how you put it because that subconscious mind is the activator. It's the activator. And it's the one that produces the results. And your conscious mind looks at the results and says, well, no, we can't do anything about that. Look, it's interesting. I like that. I like
mm,
how you talk about that. I'm really interested in learning more about the human design because, it's all connected.
yeah.
I mean, any kind of science, any kind of theory, any kind of philosophy has that skein, that weave of connection,
Hmm.
you know?
Absolutely. Yeah, that's definitely what I'm hearing and feeling too. And with that, so if someone has been listening to this conversation and they're like, "Oh, okay, so yeah, this totally makes sense. I get it. I feel the resonance with this idea. I want to learn more." How can they learn more about you? Where can they find you online? Yeah, what's the thing that's
Oh, that's nice.
yeah, you can
Well,
share.
Diane Armitage, which is just my name, dianearmitage.com. And you can find me online in my YouTube and my social media and LinkedIn and all of that under Diane Armitage. At my website, you'll find I have a free book there that you can download. It's called My Leap: 7 Steps to Legendary Success. Almost done with the Built-in Tower of Power book. So that's coming out hopefully by the end of the year, maybe the beginning of January. And I teach courses and I teach keynotes and I teach workshops and I work on a lot of mentoring one-on-one. So happy to help in any way.
Yeah, beautiful. And congratulations on well, first having written one book, but your second book coming out soon. That's such an accomplishment. I know how much work goes into, again, like we're talking about, having the inspiration, letting it simmer and in your imagination, and then like birthing it out into the world. That's the whole
It
process,
takes
right?
will.
It takes will. You got to do the step. You got to figure it out.
You got to do the steps.
Yes, I love that. Well, Diane, thank you so much for being here with me today. It was such an honor to meet you. And actually, before we go, if anyone's watching on YouTube, you've got some quite a few little statuettes in the
Oh,
background,
yeah.
and I'm super curious what they're for.
Oh, they're some of my Telly Awards. So Telly Awards are for videos, commercials, that kind of a thing. And so, yeah, so there are awards that it's a big global thing. It's great. I think I've got 1 gold and 6 silver. And a lot of times they were for commercials that I wrote or for scripts that I wrote for the openings of, big things. One of those is actually 2 of those are from Bob Proctor events where I wrote the big opening thing. And so thank you.
Yeah, very cool. I was curious, and so I figured if anyone's watching on YouTube, they might be curious too. Like those are cool.
Thank you.
What are those from? Once again, you're just such a fascinating, very cool person, and I'm so just honored and grateful to have met you. So
Well, I
thank you.
appreciate it because I think you're a fascinating and cool person.
I received that. I will take that. I appreciate that. So thank you so much, Diane. If anyone has any questions, all of the information that Diane mentioned will be in the show notes. So you can go check out her website, go find her on YouTube, all the places, follow along to see what's coming out next. And if you have any questions for me or you want to hear more, you know where to reach me at Hannah, HANNAH, at expansiveceo.com. Diane, thank you again. It was a pleasure.
My pleasure and honor. Thank you so much.
That's it for this episode. Thanks for listening, and be sure to like and subscribe. And again, if anything resonated with you from this episode, I would love to hear from you. Email me at Hannah, HANNAH, at expansiveceo.com and tell me about it. And if you're ready for your greatest expansion, you can find ways to work with me at expansiveceo.com and at x2wealthplanning.com. That's X, the numeral 2, wealthplanning.com. So until next time, remember that there is enough, you are enough, and your birthright in this lifetime is to be expansive.